Nestled in a picturesque corner of the county, our neighborhood is a charming blend of manicured lawns, well-kept homes, and friendly faces. It's a community that prides itself on its sense of order and aesthetics, largely thanks to the influence of our Homeowners Association, or HOA. Established to maintain the neighborhood's appeal and uphold community standards, the HOA is both a guiding force and a source of contention for many residents. The HOA enforces strict rules regarding property upkeep, landscaping, and even the types of outdoor activities permitted. While some homeowners appreciate these regulations for promoting a cohesive look and feel within the community, others find them stifling and overly controlling. This duality often leads to friction among neighbors, especially when someone feels their personal freedoms are being encroached upon. Karen, a self-appointed enforcer of the HOA rules, embodies this tension perfectly. With her clipboard in hand and an unwavering commitment to maintaining the neighborhood's image, she keeps a watchful eye on residents who dare to push the boundaries. Whether it's an untrimmed hedge or an unconventional garden, she's quick to raise concerns, often without considering the unique context of each situation. In recent months, I had taken to cultivating a small vegetable garden in my backyard, inspired by my desire for sustainability and homegrown produce. Little did I know that this innocent hobby would spark controversy. Karen saw my garden as an affront to our HOA regulations and took it upon herself to escalate the situation. Her actions would soon lead to an unexpected confrontation that would not only test my patience but also reveal my true identity as the county sheriff. In a community where appearances matter greatly, this incident was about to flip everything on its head. It all began one sunny afternoon when I was tending to my vegetable garden. The sun was shining, and the fresh scent of soil and herbs filled the air. I had planted tomatoes, cucumbers, and even a few rows of zinnias for a splash of color. It was a small but cherished project that brought me joy and a sense of accomplishment. Little did I know that my humble garden would soon become the center of controversy. Karen, who lived just a few houses down, was on one of her routine walks through the neighborhood when she spotted my garden. Her eyes widened in disbelief as she took in the sight of my flourishing plants. To her, this was not merely gardening. It was an outright violation of HOA rules. Without hesitation, she marched up to my front porch, clipboard in hand, ready to deliver her judgment. "You can't be serious," she exclaimed, pointing at my garden as though it were a crime scene. "This is illegal farming. You're not allowed to grow crops here." Her tone was accusatory, and I could tell she believed she was upholding the law of the land. I tried to explain that what I was doing was simply growing vegetables for personal use, emphasizing that small-scale gardening wasn't against any regulations as far as I knew. But Karen was undeterred. She rattled off a list of supposed violations. "You're violating our community guidelines on landscape design. This is supposed to be a residential area, not an agricultural zone." As she continued her tirade, I couldn't help but feel a mix of frustration and amusement. Here I was, just trying to cultivate some fresh produce while unknowingly standing in the crosshairs of an HOA enforcer who had taken it upon herself to police my backyard. Little did she know that things were about to take a surprising turn. As Karen stood on my porch, her finger jabbing the air like a gavel, I felt the tension in the atmosphere thicken. I couldn't believe we were having this conversation. "Karen, it's just a vegetable garden," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm despite the incredulousness of her claims. "I'm not running a farm. I'm just growing some tomatoes and cucumbers for myself." Her expression hardened, and she leaned in closer, eyes narrowing as if trying to dissect my argument. "It doesn't matter. You're not following the HOA guidelines. This is a residential area, not a farm. What's next? Chickens in your backyard?" Her tone dripped with disdain, and I could feel my patience wearing thin. I took a deep breath, attempting to articulate my point without escalating the situation further. "Karen, I assure you that I'm not breaking any laws. It's just a small garden for personal use. Many neighbors have similar setups." But she wasn't interested in logic or reason. Her mind was set on enforcing her version of neighborhood decorum. As we stood there, our voices began to rise, drawing the attention of passers-by. I could see some neighbors peeking through their windows, likely amused by the scene unfolding on my porch. The whole situation felt surreal. Here I was, in my own home, facing off with an HOA member who had taken it upon herself to be the arbiter of community standards. The misunderstanding seemed insurmountable as Karen continued to insist that I was breaking the rules. Frustration bubbled within me. How could someone who barely knew me be so quick to judge? It was a clash of perspectives, her rigid adherence to rules and my desire for personal freedom, each convinced of our own rightness. As the confrontation escalated, I felt an unexpected wave of resolve. This was no longer just about gardening. It was about standing up against unwarranted authority in my own backyard. As the argument with Karen escalated, I felt a familiar surge of frustration creeping in. But beneath that frustration lay an unexpected advantage. I was not just an ordinary resident, I was the county sheriff. A wave of irony washed over me as I stood there, grappling with the absurdity of the situation. Here was an HOA enforcer accusing me of illegal farming, unaware that I held the very authority she was invoking. My background in law enforcement had shaped my perspective on community and order. For years, I had dedicated myself to protecting and serving, enforcing laws while fostering relationships within the community. I understood the importance of rules and regulations. After all, they provide structure, but I also recognized when those rules overstepped their boundaries. My role as sheriff had taught me to approach conflicts with a blend of empathy and authority, seeking resolution rather than confrontation. In that moment on my porch, I realized I had a unique opportunity to reshape this interaction. I could either let Karen continue her tirade or take control of the narrative and clarify the misunderstanding. As her voice rang out with indignation, I decided it was time to reveal my true identity. "Karen," I said firmly but calmly, "I think it's time you knew something important. I am the county sheriff." Her eyes widened in disbelief, and for a brief moment, silence enveloped us. The realization that she had been confronting someone with legal authority shifted the dynamics entirely. Suddenly, the power balance tilted in my favor. This wasn't just about a vegetable garden anymore. It was about understanding the limits of authority and how easily misunderstandings could spiral out of control. As Karen struggled to regain her composure, I felt a mix of satisfaction and amusement. The irony was palpable, an HOA member calling the cops on someone who could very well be their protector and enforcer. It became clear that this incident would not only reshape our relationship but also serve as an important lesson about assumptions and community dynamics. As the realization of my identity sank in, I could see a mixture of confusion and indignation wash over Karen's face. Just when I thought we might reach some understanding, she took a step back, her expression shifting to one of defiance. It was as if a light bulb had gone off in her mind, and instead of backing down, she decided to escalate the situation even further. In a sudden burst of frustration, Karen pulled out her phone and dialed 911. "I'm calling the police," she declared, her voice quivering with indignation. "There's someone illegally farming in our neighborhood. This is a violation of HOA regulations." The irony of her action struck me hard. Here she was, calling the very authorities that I represented, oblivious to the fact that the sheriff was standing right in front of her. I watched as her voice took on an air of self-righteousness, believing she was doing the right thing by alerting the authorities to what she perceived as a community crisis. In her mind, I was just another rule breaker threatening the integrity of our neighborhood with my so-called illegal farming. The sheer absurdity of it made it difficult for me to suppress a smirk. While she spoke to the dispatcher, I couldn't help but feel a mix of amusement and exasperation. Did she truly think that calling the cops would resolve anything in her favor? My thoughts raced back to all those times I had responded to calls about minor disputes or misunderstandings, how often they stemmed from miscommunication or overzealous enforcement of rules. As Karen hung up, her eyes flickered with a hint of satisfaction, as if she believed she had secured some kind of victory. But little did she know, this call would not only expose her misunderstanding but also set in motion a series of events that would redefine our relationship and challenge her perception of authority in our community. As I stood there, ready to address whatever response might come my way, I felt an unexpected sense of empowerment. This was my moment to turn the tables and shed light on the absurdity of it all. It wasn't long before the sound of sirens pierced the neighborhood air, drawing curious glances from neighbors who had gathered to witness the unfolding drama. As the police cruiser pulled up, I could feel the tension rising once more. The officers stepped out, looking serious but quickly shifting into professional mode as they assessed the scene. When they saw Karen standing there with her clipboard, radiating indignation, they exchanged puzzled looks. But then their eyes fell on me, and I could see a flicker of recognition flash across their faces. The first officer, a burly man with a friendly demeanor, raised an eyebrow and smirked slightly. "Well, this should be interesting," he murmured to his partner. As they approached, Karen wasted no time explaining her version of events, her voice tinged with urgency. "This man is illegally farming in his backyard. It's against HOA regulations," she exclaimed, pointing dramatically at my vegetable garden. The officers listened patiently, but their expressions told a different story, in amused disbelief that contrasted sharply with her seriousness. I could see the second officer trying hard to suppress a grin as he turned to me. "Sheriff? Is that you?" he asked, his tone lightening the moment. The first officer chuckled softly while Karen looked utterly bewildered, clearly unaware of the irony unfolding before her eyes. "Looks like we're dealing with a bit of a misunderstanding here," I said, adopting a relaxed posture to ease the tension in the air. "I think we can resolve this without any need for further escalation." The officers nodded in agreement, their demeanor shifting from enforcers to allies as they began to grasp the absurdity of the situation. Karen's face flushed as the officers engaged me in a casual conversation about my gardening efforts. The humor in their reactions was palpable. It was clear they were enjoying this unexpected twist just as much as I was. What had started as an accusation of illegal farming had devolved into an impromptu neighborhood comedy show, one that Karen had unwittingly starred in. As laughter bubbled between us, I couldn't help but feel that maybe this encounter would serve as a lesson for everyone involved, including Karen herself. As news of the incident spread through the neighborhood, reactions varied from laughter to disbelief. Many neighbors peered out from behind their curtains, eager to catch a glimpse of the unfolding drama. Once the initial shock wore off, a collective narrative began to form, not just about my gardening, but about Karen's zealous enforcement of HOA rules. Some neighbors expressed their amusement at the absurdity of the situation. "I can't believe she called the cops on you for growing tomatoes," one neighbor chuckled as I recounted the story later that evening at a small gathering. "It's just gardening. It's not like you're running a farm." Others chimed in with their own stories of run-ins with Karen over minor infractions, missed lawn mowing deadlines, and unapproved paint colors. It seemed I wasn't alone in my frustration with her overzealousness. On the other hand, there were those who felt a pang of sympathy for Karen, viewing her actions as misguided but rooted in a desire to maintain community standards. "She just cares about the neighborhood," one neighbor remarked. "But she definitely took it too far this time." This perspective highlighted the complexity of community dynamics, how one person's commitment to order could easily become another's source of irritation. As for my role as sheriff, it was met with mixed reactions. Some residents expressed gratitude for my calm handling of the situation, appreciating that I could bring humor to what could have been a contentious encounter. "It's nice to know we have someone like you looking out for us," one neighbor said with a smile. Others seemed surprised, realizing that their sheriff was living among them as just another resident, tending to a garden rather than patrolling the streets. In the days that followed, discussions about community governance and personal freedoms flourished among neighbors. Karen's actions had inadvertently sparked a dialogue about how rules should serve us rather than control us. While she may have intended to assert order, the incident ultimately opened the door for greater understanding and camaraderie within our tight-knit community, one that thrived on both individuality and collective respect. In the days following the incident, the ripple effects of that fateful afternoon began to settle across the neighborhood. My relationship with the HOA, particularly with Karen, had fundamentally shifted. Rather than viewing me as just another resident, Karen now had to contend with the fact that she had confronted the very sheriff of our county. Although she didn't apologize directly, there was a notable change in her demeanor. Our paths crossed less frequently, and when they did, her usual assertiveness seemed tempered by a newfound caution. For my part, I took the opportunity to engage in more open conversations with other HOA members, emphasizing the importance of balancing community rules with individual freedoms. I proposed a community meeting where residents could voice their opinions on local governance and address any concerns about the HOA's role in our lives. Many neighbors were eager to participate, seeing this as a chance to reshape how our community operated. The incident also fostered camaraderie among residents. People who had previously felt isolated by Karen's rigid enforcement found a voice and began expressing their own grievances and ideas for improvement. We began discussing concepts like community gardens or shared spaces that could encourage collaboration rather than division, a stark contrast to Karen's approach. Despite the initial tension, there was an unexpected lightness that permeated our interactions afterward. Neighbors would often joke about illegal farming when they saw me tending my garden, turning what was once an uncomfortable situation into a source of humor and connection. As for Karen, while she maintained her position within the HOA, it was clear she had learned a valuable lesson about assumptions and authority. She became more open to dialogue with residents rather than immediately resorting to enforcement measures. Over time, our community emerged stronger and more cohesive, with a greater appreciation for both individual expression and collective responsibility. thanks in no small part to an unexpected confrontation over a vegetable garden that turned into a pivotal moment for us all. Reflecting on the incident with Karen and the subsequent fallout, I've come to appreciate the complex dynamics of authority and community living, especially within a homeowners association. Living in an HOA can be a double-edged sword. On one hand, it offers a framework meant to preserve property values and maintain a certain aesthetic that many residents desire. On the other hand, it can foster an environment where individual creativity and personal freedoms feel stifled. Karen's actions highlighted how easily authority can be misused when individuals become overly focused on enforcement rather than understanding. Her desire to maintain order transformed into a rigid interpretation of rules, ultimately leading to an absurd confrontation. This brings to light a critical lesson about the balance between authority and community. While rules are essential for organization, they should not overshadow the human element of our interactions. The incident also illustrated the power of dialogue and resolving conflicts. In a community setting, open communication can bridge divides and foster mutual respect. The post-incident discussions led to an awakening among residents, encouraging them to voice their concerns and ideas rather than remain passive participants in HOA governance. It became clear that an engaged community thrives when individuals feel empowered to share their perspectives. Moreover, my role as sheriff added another layer to this conversation about authority. It reminded me that those in positions of power must remain approachable and willing to listen. Authority is most effective when it is exercised with empathy and understanding, rather than as a tool for control. Ultimately, this experience underscored the importance of collaboration over confrontation. It challenged me and my neighbors to think critically about how we govern ourselves and how we can create a community that values both structure and individual expression. Living within an HOA doesn't have to mean sacrificing personal freedoms. Instead, it can be an opportunity to cultivate a richer, more vibrant community where everyone's voice matters. As this unusual chapter in my life comes to a close, the experience has left me with several key lessons that resonate beyond the specific incident with Karen. First and foremost, it's clear that communication is paramount in any community setting. The breakdown of dialogue can lead to misunderstandings that escalate into larger conflicts, as we saw in this case. Open lines of communication encourage residents to voice their concerns and foster a sense of belonging, which ultimately strengthens community ties. Understanding is another crucial element that emerged from this experience. It's essential to recognize that everyone has different perspectives and motivations, especially when enforcing rules or standards. Karen, in her zeal to uphold the HOA guidelines, lost sight of the human aspect of her interactions. By taking the time to understand one another's viewpoints, we can bridge gaps and create a more harmonious environment. Moreover, this incident reminded us that humor can be a powerful tool in resolving conflicts. What initially felt like a serious accusation turned into a source of laughter and connection among neighbors. Embracing the lighter side of our disputes not only diffuses tension but also brings people together. It allows us to view challenges as shared experiences rather than isolating incidents. Finally, I learned that authority should always be balanced with empathy. My position as sheriff gave me a unique perspective on the responsibility that comes with power. It's imperative for those in authority to remain approachable and willing to listen, rather than simply enforcing rules without context. In conclusion, my encounter with Karen was not just about gardening. It served as an eye-opening lesson in community dynamics. By prioritizing communication, understanding, humor, and empathy, we can cultivate a neighborhood where everyone feels valued and heard, a place where disputes are resolved not through confrontation but through collaboration and camaraderie. This experience has not only enriched my role as sheriff but also deepened my appreciation for the vibrant tapestry of our community.